Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our ILAD information seminar this evening. Thank you to our guests. They're back there if you want to walk back and meet them before they come up and speak. We're very grateful to have Bob Feckman with us this evening, as well as Sarah Geis. We look forward to hearing from both of them. Also, I do want to, at the outset, thank our program committee and our program manager. You'll hear from her in just a moment, but would everyone that's on the program committee either stand up or wave? I think you deserve a round of applause here. Thank you all very much for everything you're doing for ILAD. I'm Tom Easterday. I have the honor and privilege of being the president of ILAD this year, and I'm also Matt's dad. Matt is one of our participants in a lot of our ILAD activities. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of ILAD. I know a lot of you here are very familiar with our organization. Many of you that are online probably are also, but I did want to, and welcome to all of you online, I did want to give you a very brief introduction to ILAD. So first of all, ILAD was created in October of 2019, made it through the pandemic period pretty well. We have three basic goals at ILAD. It's to provide housing, to provide enrichment and educational programs, and also to provide social options. And as you can see, our real aim is to enable adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities to have basically the same opportunities as all of us do, and to be able to live meaningful lives and fulfilling lives in their communities. So to do that, we first, of course, have to be informed by our self-advocates. We want their input. We want them to be a part of our leadership. And at ILAD, we actually have 3 self-advocates serving on our board of directors. So we get direct input at all of our board meetings, and very proud of each of them. Our enrichment and educational program, I won't go into great detail on that. You can learn more on our website, iladinc.org. If you haven't already visited that, I please encourage you to do so. But we have informational seminars like this. We have it 2 weeks from now on the 18th, the Family Connect program, which is also to provide information and networking for parents and caregivers in particular, but also for the self-advocates. And then we also have a variety of different types of classes that we provide, independent living classes. You can see a little bit of a display over there that we had for an open house we had a few weeks ago about all of the classes that are provided and all of the clubs that we have too. We have a lot of exciting clubs to participate in, everything from the Community Service Club to the Hiking Club to the Book Club, and our very, very popular game nights. And again, you can learn more about all of those programs on our website. We have a lot of social options. We try to present at least one per quarter. The most recent was going to a concert in Whitestown, an outdoor concert. Prior to that, we went to the Indianapolis 500 track. I had a great time there with the Kiss the Bricks tour. I asked everybody afterwards what the track tasted like, and one said rubber, the other said victory. So I think they got the message clearly about the Speedway. So that was a lot of fun. So again, I won't go through all these, but again, the social activities, the outreach activities, a lot of fun. We encourage all of you, please come up and get some additional information with regard to the forms if you haven't completed those for your self-advocate to be a participant in some ILAD activities. There are several upcoming workshops you can learn about also. Please feel free to email me at teasterday@iladinc.org, or also our program manager. You can at simply program.manager@iladinc.org. And there's one other person I want to introduce to you this evening, and that's our new executive director. And Matt, why don't you come on over here? Matt just came on board on August 1st, so I'm not going to make him come up here and give a speech. But I wanted to introduce Matt Foltz. Matt has, we are very fortunate to get someone as our executive director for ILAD that has nonprofit executive experience. He's got over 10 years of working with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I know he's going to do a great job for us. So let's everybody welcome Matt. Thank you. In the future, the last prong, the third prong, our housing development, Crossbridge Point. We do have a separate website for that, crossbridgepoint.org, that you can learn a little bit more about our plans for that. And certainly we're going to get a lot more input from self-advocates, parents, and caregivers regarding that going forward. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to our program manager. She does a fabulous job along with our program committee, as I mentioned earlier. And please, everyone, welcome Michelle Gray.
Thank you, Tom. I I feel like I'm a little out of practice. We do these about once a quarter, and we haven't had one since April, so it seems like ages, but hopefully it'll come back and seem real natural. But I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming this evening, and thank you for everyone who is watching us on Facebook Live. We also have a Facebook Live event going and have a couple people that I know are out of state but are looking for some of the information that ILAD is providing this evening. So that is very exciting for us to be able to reach even beyond our city and state borders. Just some housekeeping things. Restrooms are out in the hallway a little bit to the left, and we have snack table over there with the bright yellow tablecloth that you can see. Please feel free to help yourself to any snacks or water even throughout the event. And then just a little bit of an overview for the new people to our events is the format of our meeting. We have 2 different speakers who are joining us tonight. They will each share information, and then at the end of both presentations, we will open up the floor to question and answers. So if you have any questions, if you could kind of write those down on your agenda or a scrap piece of paper, and then we'll open up the floor to be able to answer questions to both of those speakers. So then we'll get right on to introducing our first speaker. As Tom said, we have Robert Fechtman with us this evening. He's a lifelong resident of Indiana, graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in music and a major in economics. And then he went on and received his JD from Rutgers School of Law, attended University of San Diego's Institute on International and Comparative Law, at Magdalen
that whole thing, are you?
College. It is quite extensive, let me tell you. But he focuses primarily on the practice of older and disabled persons, particularly special needs trust, estate plannings and trust, health law, Medicaid planning, guardianships, and descendants estates. So he was the perfect candidate when we decided that we wanted to share information about future financial planning. Mr. Fechtman is also a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys and holds numerous board and I'm embarrassing him, sorry. But at this time, we'd like to welcome Robert Fechtman, and I will load up. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Michelle.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Well, a couple of quick things at first. I was going to say nice to meet you, but I know most of you already, so nice to see you again. And also, my watch was nice enough to remind me that I'm speaking here tonight about 5 minutes ago, which, you know, it's a good thing I was already here. I made up a little PowerPoint presentation for you. I don't know how easy it will be for me to follow it. I thought we'd talk about the whole concept of a special needs trust first, and I'll just point out that the idea of a special needs trust, and by the way, that's a term of art. You might hear it called other things, like I hear supplemental needs trust, and I hear medical trust. I hear various different things, but special needs trust is probably the most common. That's what I tend to call it. If you hear somebody say supplemental needs trust, they're not talking about a different trust. They're just giving it a different name. But the point of all these trusts is to keep individuals or make individuals eligible for needs-based public benefits. And I thought we'd just spend a couple minutes talking about the different benefits. I have conversations with clients all the time about what kind of Social Security benefits they're receiving. And it makes a big difference in the kind of advice I'm going to give them, because Social Security disability insurance, and there are a couple different varieties of this, but you may be familiar with the variety where kids can go on their parents' Social Security. That's used to be called disabled adult child benefits. It's now called childhood disability benefits, or survivor's benefits, or dependents benefits. These are all related to Social Security disability or Social Security retirement, and these are not needs-based benefits. So you don't need a special needs trust necessarily to preserve those kinds of benefits. But SSI, I can look at the computer screen. SSI is very much a needs-based public benefit. That's supplemental security income. And that's the kind of Social Security that folks receive when they're disabled, but they don't have a work record of their own to draw on, or they don't have a parent's work record to draw on. So they're drawing the public funds. Then related to Social Security disability, we have Medicare, not to be confused with Medicaid. That also is not a needs-based benefit. You don't need to have a special needs trust to be on Medicare. But again, you very much need a special needs trust to stay on Medicaid if you have money, because Medicaid and SSI, these two programs I just mentioned, both of them have resource limits, meaning how much you can have in the bank. This is not a monthly income thing, how much you can have in the bank, and the resource limit is $2,000. Related to Medicaid are Medicaid waivers, and I'll bet a lot of you in the room are either on a Medicaid waiver or you have a child who's on a Medicaid waiver, so I probably don't need to tell you a lot about it. But in order to be eligible for the Medicaid waiver, you must also be eligible for Medicaid. And in order to be eligible for Medicaid, as I said, you can't have more than $2,000 in the bank. So this is why we're talking about special needs trusts. I think I have two more benefits here, and I'll just briefly mention SNAP, which is what we call food stamps now, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And it's a needs-based benefit. You can't have too much money or too much income and be receiving SNAP. And then Section 8 housing is really only income sensitive. They don't care if you have money in the bank, but if you're earning income, and distributions from a special needs trust or any other kind of trust could be considered to be income, it'll affect your housing subsidy and therefore how much rent you pay. So that puts us in perspective of, why are we talking about special needs trust? Because people who have money or have extra income might need a trust in order to shield that money or that income from being counted against them for their public benefits. We talked about the resource limit. Income is an issue too. Medicaid and the Medicaid waivers have an income cap that you may not be familiar with, but it's 3 times whatever SSI is paying. SSI pays $841 a month this year. 3 times that is $2,535. So if you have monthly income greater than that, you'll need a special kind of special needs trust that we'll talk about here in a minute. In-kind distributions, we'll talk about that because SSI has a concept of in-kind support and maintenance. And you've probably heard about this before, or at least a little inkling of it, but SSI is meant to pay for food and shelter. So if anyone's helping you with your food and shelter and you're on SSI, there's going to be a reduction of your SSI based on how much help you're getting with your food and shelter. That's called in-kind support and maintenance, and it's something to be careful of with the trust or as parents to know what impact you helping with food and shelter is going to have on SSI. There are multiple kinds of special needs trusts. Third-party special needs trusts are when a parent or a grandparent or anyone other than the recipient of public benefits sets up the trust for the individual, and they put their money in there instead of the individual's own money. We call it a third-party special needs trust because it was established and funded by third parties like parents or grandparents. There's also a concept on these slides, I call them self-settled special needs trusts. I've started calling them first-party special needs trust to make it more similar to the third-party concept. But the first-party or self-settled special needs trust is where the individual who has or needs public benefits has money of their own. And we can shelter that money in a special needs trust too, but it's a little different than the third-party special needs trust. We also have something called a testamentary special needs trust. That means it's in someone's last will and testament. That's why we call it a testamentary special needs trust. And I don't think this is very appropriate to our discussion tonight, so I'll just say briefly that if I get a husband on Medicaid the first thing I'm going to do for the wife is I'm going to set up a new will for her. And I'm going to put a special needs trust in her will, so if she happens to be the first one to die, she can leave everything to her husband in a special needs trust and he won't lose his Medicaid. The law that allows first-party special needs trusts is called OBRA 93, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993. And it said people who have money of their own can put that money in trust for themselves, or their guardian or their parents or their grandparents or someone else can put the money in trust for them. Remember, it's their own money, but somebody else could put it in trust for them with a court order or something like that. And they could keep or become eligible for public benefits even though it's their own money. The section of OBRA 93 that allows that is called D4A. It's 42 U.S.C. 1396 PD4A. And you say, how can you remember that, Bob? Well, I deal with these trusts every day. And the D4A is the kind of trust we've just been talking about. D4B, the next paragraph in the statute, is otherwise called a Miller Trust or a qualified income trust. And this is the trust that shelters your monthly income if you have more than 3 times SSI in monthly income. And then D4C, the next paragraph after that, is what Sarah's going to be talking about. That's a pooled special needs trust, like the Arc of Indiana Master Trust. All 3 of these first-party or self-settled special needs trusts are designed, as I said before, to receive the money of the public benefits recipient or the income of the public benefits recipient without them losing their eligibility for these needs-based public benefits. Now, there are some very specific rules about D4A trusts that I want you to be aware of. They can only be established by the individual themselves, a court, a parent, a grandparent, or a legal guardian. So I guess I can't randomly set up a special needs trust with your money for you unless I'm your legal guardian. It's got to be in this category of persons who can set up the trust for you. It must be for your sole benefit, meaning there can't be other beneficiaries of the trust. In order to set up this kind of trust, you must be under age 65. So I've had some cases where an individual's getting a personal injury settlement or an inheritance, and they're 64 and about to turn 65, and so we're rushing to get this trust set up because we've got to get it set up and funded before they turn 65. And I might have occasion to mention the 65 or other age-sensitive things tonight, and I'll just point out that Congress for a long time has had rules where when they make a new law, they have to be able to say, we can pay for it. So we're going to get enough tax money or we're going to borrow money from some other program in order to pay for it. And that means often when they set up a new law, they have to limit the number of persons who could be eligible for this new kind of trust or this new kind of ABLE account, which you'll learn about at your next program, I guess. But they'll limit it to certain age groups because that way we can limit the amount of people that are eligible for it, and it will save us money and make it more affordable. So I guess they decided way back in '93 that if you had money of your own and you were 65 or older, that you shouldn't be allowed to set up a trust like this. The most important thing probably of all with the first-party special needs trust is that you understand that it has to have a clause in it that says when the beneficiary of the trust dies, if there's any money left in the trust at that time, first thing we have to do with it is reimburse the state or states that provided Medicaid assistance to that individual. And remember, I want to emphasize this, that this is money that began with the individual who's on public benefits. So it's not every single special needs trust, it's only if the individual who's on public benefits contributed their own money that we have to have this payback provision where the state or states get reimbursed for their Medicaid expenses. The federal government doesn't get reimbursed for their SSI expenses, only the state gets reimbursed for their Medicaid expenses. Why would anyone set up a D4A trust? Well, I think I'm going to skip over some of this, or at least give it short shrift because of the time limitations tonight. But Medicaid is a program that, they have a lot of clout when they negotiate the prices that they pay to medical providers. And I've seen a lot of the Medicaid bills when individuals die. And the bill will show what was billed by the medical providers, and then in the next column it will show what Medicaid paid for those services. And I'm just going to guess on average it's about 30% of what the medical bill would otherwise have been. And remember, I told you earlier, you don't have to reimburse the state until the individual beneficiary of the trust dies. So I think of this as a long-term interest-free loan to repay the government at the rate of about 30% of whatever you borrowed. And if you think of it that way, it might actually make sense to do a D4A trust if the individual has money of their own, and otherwise they'd lose these valuable public benefits like Medicaid and SSI. That's the point I was just making, that it's the Medicaid expenditures, not the market costs. And there's no interest. And it's an alternative to a restricted guardianship account. I don't know if anyone in the room has ever heard of a restricted guardianship account, but if an individual on public benefits had money of their own and they were under a legal guardianship, you could have the judge sign an order saying, you may not access this money without a specific order of the court. That would allow you to stay on your public benefits too, but then every time you want to go use the money, you got to go back to court and ask for it every time. And Sarah and I are here to tell you that's a big pain in the neck when you can just have a trustee that you can work with who knows how to keep you eligible for your benefits. Third-party special needs trusts may be even more of interest to you, and I've set up third-party special needs trusts for a number of people in the room. The point of a third-party special needs trust is to receive someone else's money. So parents and grandparents do this a lot for their kids and their grandkids. Make sure that if they're going to give money to their child or grandchild who has public benefits, that money is not going to cause them to lose those benefits. And especially make sure that when the parents die or the grandparents die and they leave money to the child or grandchild, that money is not going to interfere with their future eligibility for public benefits. Oh, and the point of that first bullet point on the slide, by the way, is that it might interest you to know that if a parent of a disabled child or a grandparent of a disabled grandchild needs to go on Medicaid themselves because they have expensive long-term care costs, normally if you give money away, it makes you ineligible for Medicaid for up to 5 years. It's called the look-back period. And the short story is that for about every $7,000 you give away, you're ineligible for Medicaid for 1 month. So you could be ineligible for Medicaid for a long time if you decided to give money away because you have expensive long-term care needs. But if you give money to a disabled person, even in trust, there's no transfer penalty for Medicaid. So I have clients who, they need Medicaid and they have a disabled child. They can give up to all of their money to the Special Needs Trust for the disabled child, and they can all use public benefits. The parents can go on Medicaid if they gave the money to the Special Needs Trust. And remember, if they gave the money to the Special Needs Trust, it's not going to cause the child or grandchild to lose their public benefits. Any interested third party could fund this trust. I have seen friends of the family and other people fund trusts like this. And I think the timing is good. How much more time do I have? I should have looked at my watch when I started talking. 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. Well, let's talk about what if you have a special needs trust and it's got money in it? How does this work? And what are the basic rules that a trustee would need to be aware of? This might give you an idea of if you were going to set up a special needs trust for yourself, or if you were going to set up a special needs trust for a child or a grandchild, once you put the money in there, how do you get it back out? And what can you use it for? Well, I would say in general, one of the biggest rules to be aware of is you can't give the individual cash. If you give them money, or even something like a gift card, I know the Social Security Administration considers the gift card to be the same as if you wrote them a check or gave them cash. It's money that they could use to pay for food and shelter or medical expenses, and so it will have a dollar for dollar impact on their eligibility for public benefits. So no cash, but you could pay bills for the individual. I know trustees very often pay monthly bills or even weekly bills, or maybe they pay semi-annual bills like property taxes. And as long as you're paying the vendor that's providing the goods or services instead of giving the money to the beneficiary to pay their own bills, you won't have any impact on the eligibility for public benefits. Food, clothing, and shelter can cause a problem with Medicaid eligibility, but it's a very narrow issue. Because believe it or not, the Medicaid rule says you lose your Medicaid if somebody else pays for all of your food, all of your clothing, or all of your shelter. So I tell trustees, if they need clothes, just don't buy all of their clothes. They've got to buy their own t-shirt or pair of socks or something so that you're not paying for all of their clothes. I don't even know what I meant by ordinary fiduciary obligations, so let's skip that one. Think in broader categories too, like a trust could pay for entertainment. I'm going to skip to travel because that's something that I get asked about all the time. But education, counseling, therapy, companionship, adaptive aids, medical care. But I really want to emphasize things that you wouldn't get paid for by Medicaid or by your Medicaid waiver. Entertainment, travel, electronics like, do we still call them electronics? Devices like your new iPad or your Apple Watch or your iPhone. If your trust pays for those things, you're not going to have any problems with your public benefits. And as you know, Medicaid is health insurance. They're not paying for anything but your medical care. And SSI is very limited. And even if you're getting Social Security disability or you're getting disabled adult child benefits or childhood disability benefits, that's limited too. So having a special needs trust to pay for these extra things without causing problems with your benefits is really nice. If you've got a trustee that knows what they're doing, I like to say there's hardly anything I can think of that the trustee couldn't do if they're complying with the Medicaid and the SSI rules. What about an automobile or the costs of operating the automobile? Trustees pay for those sorts of things all the time. Food, clothing, and shelter. Got to get back to that. I should have taken clothing off of that list because it's actually been a long time since SSI didn't care whether money was used for clothing. It's just food and shelter now. And I mentioned this in-kind support and maintenance earlier. Trustees just need to be careful. So when a trustee is asked, will you pay for food or shelter costs, usually the trustee will think of, maybe I could pay other bills. And let me give you kind of the classic example of this. Shelter costs include things like your rent or your mortgage, and your property taxes, and your gas or electric bill, your trash removal, and your water and sewer. But you may have noticed I didn't add to the list things like cable TV, or high-speed internet, or any of these other things like a landline or a cell phone bill. So if I'm a trustee and I get asked to pay the electric bill, I say I can't pay the electric bill without causing problems with your SSI. But maybe I can pay your cable bill instead. You pay the electric bill out of your SSI, I'll pay the cable bill. I'm going to pay a bill for you. There are just certain bills that I can't pay without affecting your SSI. And I could buy a residence for you. And I think that's kind of the extreme example because, of course, a residence is going to cost a lot of money, especially these days when the housing prices seem to be so inflated. And maybe the trust can afford to do it, maybe the trust can't afford to do it. But if the trust can afford to do it, this is clearly something that a trustee could pay for. Buy the house where the beneficiary of the trust lives. And maybe even think about putting that house in the name of the beneficiary or in their guardianship, or keep it in the trust either way. But a trustee could pay for a residence and could pay for other expenses associated with the residence, like upkeep of the house, or your water heater goes out, or your heating and air conditioning goes out. The trustee can clearly pay for those kinds of things too, because none of that is on the list of shelter expenses that would have an impact on SSI. The last thing I think I have time to say is that I'm a member of a group called the Special Needs Alliance, which is a group of lawyers from across the country that do the same kind of work that I do. We do a lot of special needs trusts, guardianships, decedents, estates, all the things that you mentioned from my bio, but above all, special needs trusts. And I brought a bunch of brochures that are on my table back there. I didn't think to bring my cloth that has the name of my firm on it, so it's the table back there with no cloth, but I've got a bunch of brochures on there about things like SSI and trusts and choosing a trustee. All those brochures were put together by the Special Needs Alliance, and I recommend that you take as many of those brochures as you want. We have an excellent website. It's specialneedsalliance.com. I'm sorry, I should have changed that on the slide too. It's actually .org. We changed to a not-for-profit years ago, and I just never updated this slide. Specialneedsalliance.org. And there are some great resources on there, including a handbook for trustees. And that handbook for trustees, I think, is very helpful. I don't really need it because I know all this information, but so many of my clients have said they looked at that handbook and it was just really helpful to them. So I suggest going on the website, see if there is anything else interesting there beyond what I brought on the table back there. And I think I'm about out of time. Save your questions for the end, because after Sarah tells you about the ARC Trust, we've got time for questions.
Thank you very much. A lot of information, and I'm sure a lot of us have questions, so I hope you are writing those questions down. I wanted to mention one thing. Bob had mentioned that the whole thing about SSI and SSDI and all of the public benefits. We are hosting events in October to address those specific issues as well. And we are going to be bringing in some speakers who are very skilled at not only helping families manage those public benefits, but also how to manage those public benefits while you're working and having an income. So that can be an art in itself, and those speakers in October, you should see those popping up on our website very soon, but we'll have some more information in that regards. So now our second speaker, Sarah Geis. She joined the ARC Master Trust as the Assistant Trust Director in January of 22. Prior to this position, Sarah worked for the Autism Society of Indiana, assisting those receiving direct care services in central Indiana. As part of the ARC, Sarah meets with individuals and families who are interested in learning more about the trust, guides them through the trust enrollment process, and delivers presentations throughout the state. Welcome, Sarah. Let me get yours up. There you go.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm really excited to share a little bit about the ARC Master Trust with you. Thankfully, Bob did a lot of the heavy lifting for me in telling you all about the ins and outs of what a special needs trust is. So some of this information is going to overlap just a little bit, but I hope it is still incredibly informative. So just a little bit to start. So the ARC Master Trust is actually part of the ARC of Indiana. And this is a statewide organization that provides advocacy resources and support for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities across the state. We are based in Indianapolis, but we do serve all Hoosiers. And we were started in the 1950s by a group of parents who wanted to advocate for a better life for their children, not only for their children, but for every Hoosier going forward with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In addition to the ARC Trust, we also do a lot of legislation and public policy over at the State House. And we are connected with the, oh gosh, I just lost the name of it. It's SAI, Self Advocates of Indiana. And we are also affiliated with the ARC of the United States. Like Bob said, so a special needs trust is a way for individuals with disabilities who receive government benefits, a way to save their financial resources without jeopardizing those benefits. So the purpose of a special needs trust is to supplement and not supplant those benefits. There are a series of rules that a special needs trust does need to follow in order to stay in compliance with Social Security and Medicaid. The biggest one is that the special needs trust can only be used for the primary and sole benefit of the beneficiary and at the sole and absolute discretion of the trustee. So really, the primary and sole benefit helps maintain those government benefits. So if the trust is established for you, we are here to use that trust for you. As part of the special needs trust, there also needs to be an approval process of the funds that are going to be used to pay for those goods and services. And then this also keeps the trust from counting as a resource. And the person or the organization who does this approval process is the trustee. In a private special needs trust or a D4A trust, that could be an individual. That can also be a private organization like a bank or an attorney. Like with the ARC Master Trust, that is a D4C. So in a D4C pooled special needs trust, the trustee is a nonprofit organization. And for families who are interested in setting up a special needs trust, they would want to work with an attorney or with a nonprofit organization to determine who the trustee would be and who the best trustee would be in that situation. If the trustee is to be a family member or an attorney or a bank in a private special needs trust situation, they would just want to ensure that they are familiar with how Social Security and Medicaid can be utilized for a special needs trust. And like Bob said, he has really great resources on those sorts of things for individuals who are interested in being a trustee. Families can elect a professional trustee, or they can elect a nonprofit organization like the ARC to be the trustee for their individual's trust. The ARC Master Trust was formed in 1988. It serves people of all disabilities, including those with emotional, intellectual, mental, and other developmental disabilities. The only requirement that we ask for folks who want to set up a trust with the ARC is that they be eligible to receive some form of Social Security benefit. So they do not need to be receiving monetary funds for Social Security, but they just need to be eligible to receive that benefit going forward. We do have a trust advisory committee, and the ARC of Indiana Board of Directors provides advice and oversight on the ARC Master Trust. And as of December 2021, we had over $118 million on deposit with the National Bank of Indianapolis, and I believe as of right now we have over 5,000 active trusts engaged with us. So I'm first going to talk about our Trust One account. So that is our third-party special needs trust. And like Bob had mentioned, it is a way for loved ones like parents or grandparents to be able to leave money for their loved ones who are receiving government benefits without jeopardizing their eligibility. Usually, the establishment of a Trust One account is included as a part of someone's estate planning or when someone is updating their estate. Typically, you'll mention the trust as the recipient of the funds of a life insurance policy or as a will, instead of naming the person so that you don't jeopardize the individual's benefit eligibility. You can put whatever funds you would like to include into that trust, and that can be from any source. There also isn't a minimum or maximum for the amount of funds that you're intending to put into that trust for that loved one. In some cases, a trust can be funded during the lifetime of the donor. So in this case, the donor would be the parent or the grandparent. That is if they intend to use those funds while the individual donor is still alive. But in most cases, this trust is established to be utilized after the passing of those donors for the benefit of that individual. Accounts with the ARC Master Trust are invested when there are more than $30,000. If the trust has under $30,000, sorry, I've been told to step back just a little bit. Is this better? Okay, so sorry about that. Thank you. Accounts that have more than $30,000 are invested with us. If they are under $30,000, they would not be invested. So this slide talks about some specific sections of the ARC Master Trust that are unique to us. Typically, with a Trust One account, when they are set up to be established to be spent over the lifetime of the beneficiary, we create an annual targeted spending amount. And so this is going to be really similar to a budget. It's based on the age of the beneficiary when they start using the trust and the amount of funds that are in the account. And that's going to give us a number that will be that targeted spending limit for the year, and that's year over year. It also allows us to budget the funds so that there's money in the account for the individual to use through age 65. We found age 65 to be a really great year to ballpark as we're budgeting for our beneficiaries. And this is really only just an aim. If for an unseen reason we go over in the year, that's okay. We're here to support the individuals, and we're going to continue to support them. We also don't require that they use all of the funds in for that budget for that year. If they end up not using everything in the budget, then it'll just roll over to the next year. So you might be thinking now, well, what if my loved one reaches the age of 65 and there's no more money left in their trust? We are set up to continue to be able to support them. We do have something that's called the Remainder Fund, and it's a pool of financial resources to continue to pay for beneficiaries through the rest of their lives if they run out of funds from their trust. Another aspect of our trust is we have what are called key people. And key people are folks who are associated with an individual's account, who can contact us on their behalf when they want us to pay for various goods and services. So sometimes we'll have the individual for whom the trust is set up for be able to contact us when they want their trust to pay for things, but they also might want a friend or a support staff or a loved one to also be able to reach out to us on their behalf. And in those cases, we would assign them as this key person status. And like Bob mentioned, with a Trust One or third-party special needs trust, the donors who are establishing it do have 100% discretion on where funds go to in the event that there are remaining funds in the account when the beneficiary passes away. So there is no Medicaid payback in this sort of trust. And I just mentioned that, but this slide also says the same thing. So in a trust fund situation, the donor would name who any remaining funds were to go to, should there be remaining funds in the account, and the beneficiary has passed away. But our goal really is to be able to utilize all of those funds and to spend them throughout the beneficiary's lifetime to ensure the best quality of life possible. So now I'm going to talk about the other trust that we administer, which is called Trust 2. This is our first party special needs trust. So Trust 2 was established in part with the ARC of the United States in 1993 that made it possible for a person with a disability to be able to fund a trust for themselves and maintain government benefit eligibility. And the ARC of Indiana established our Trust 2 in 1995. Bob did a great job of describing, why would a person want to fund a trust with their own money? So sometimes, individuals who are receiving government benefits receive an inheritance that they didn't expect, or a lump sum from Social Security. A personal injury settlement. Sometimes we see individuals win the lottery and don't know what to do with those funds because they're worried that that might disrupt their benefits. And having a first party or a trust to account gives them the opportunity to retain those funds and keep their government benefits. And it's also a way for them to have like a savings account for it to be spent wisely over time, but they're also welcome to use it however they'd like. Like Trust One, there is no minimum or maximum that needs to be deposited into a Trust Two account. On average, we establish Trust Two accounts with maybe a couple $1,000s, sometimes only a couple of $100s. You might see with a private special needs trust, there might be a minimum deposit amount. With the ARC Master Trust, that is not the case. So whatever an individual would want to use to set up their trust, we're happy to support that. Now, does the ARC 2 require a remainder to be left to the ARC? So this is part of that Medicaid payback. So the federal laws that established first-party special needs trusts do state that when a beneficiary passes away, any funds that are left in the account should be used to reimburse the state for the Medicaid funds spent on that person. But if there are any funds left over after Medicaid has been satisfied, that is going to get passed on to an individual that that beneficiary has named. Federal laws do allow that if a trust is administered by a nonprofit organization like the ARC, the organization can retain up to 100% of any funds left, rather than that money going back to state Medicaid. So the ARC Master Trust does have an agreement with Indiana Medicaid that says that we retain 50%. That 50% goes to the remainder fund to continue to support our beneficiaries. So it does come to the ARC, but it is used to continue to support beneficiaries if they've run out of funds and they're still with us, so that we can continue to be able to support them. In the event that we did not retain this 50%, it's also incredibly likely that Medicaid would take 100% of what is left. But again, like a Trust One account, we want to ensure that whatever is in the trust is being used to better an individual's quality of life. So it's not going to just sit there. We want to be able to ensure that it's used in the variety of ways to better an individual and give them the best life that we possibly can. So a trust can be used for a wide variety of disability and non-disability related expenses. So things like school tuition, television, cable bills, internet, phone. We do a lot of travel. Any Medicaid or medical expenses that isn't covered by Medicaid or an individual's insurance. There's a wide variety of things. I do have with me on my table, we do have a page of examples of what an individual can use to purchase for their trust, so it's a wide variety of goods and services. But again, we do just need to be aware of that primary sole benefit and ensuring that what we use for the trust doesn't impact an individual's SSI benefits. So how are requests for disbursements made? So like I said earlier, disbursements are approved by a trustee through a process. So if an individual with us wants their trust to pay for something, they will have a dedicated account manager. So that's someone in our office that they can contact Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, to say, hey, I want my trust to be able to pay for this. And we work with them on how we are able to make that possible. We do a lot of monthly bill pays, annual bill pays for individuals. So in those situations, we just ask that we get the invoice. Yep, sorry. We usually ask that they send us the bill or the receipt or the invoice, and we're able to write them a check. We also, communicate a lot with individuals on how those goods and services get paid. So if they ever have a question on, hey, I'm going to a store and I want to be able to purchase clothes, or hey, I found this television at Best Buy that I really want, how do we go about purchasing that for me? The trust account manager will be able to answer all of those questions. We do process disbursements twice a week. Okay, so that's every Tuesday and Thursday, so we are usually able to get the turnaround for a trust done pretty quickly. So for example, if an individual were to call their trust account manager on a Friday to pay for something, we can get that turned around by the next Tuesday. And we have over 30 years of trust experience, so we are really knowledgeable about the government benefits that an individual can receive in Indiana and how those can be impacted by a trust and vice versa. We do all of the receipt and record management and administrative procedures for our beneficiaries, so that's not something that they need to worry about. For individuals who are in a Social Security or Medicaid redetermination process, we also provide assistance so that they're not doing that alone, especially if Medicaid or Social Security has questions about the trust. And we work very closely with our individuals and our key people to ensure that their trusts are being used for what they want them to be used for. And if you have any questions about the ARC Master Trust specifically, I'm the person to reach out to. I meet with people in person across the state, so if you have specific questions related to your loved ones or yourself, feel welcome to reach out to me. This is our address and my direct contact information, but you're also welcome to meet me at my table and stop and say hi. All right, thanks everyone.
Will you just stay up here for us?
I have to stay here.
We're going to do a little bit of question and answer session, so I will have both of them up here at the mic, and hopefully we won't get as much feedback. That was not your fault.
No, okay.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to just say them out loud for your benefit, for the people that are online. If you could repeat that so that everybody can hear. And I do have one question already from online that I'll be sharing with you in just a second.
Oh, awesome.
So.
Is that a sea coral?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Is it okay if I take that?
My friend in the back in the blue, yeah.
Bob, I know sometimes definition plays into it. When you were at the very end on what an SNT can provide, and you said, we got the issues related to possible reduction of benefit related to shelter, but then said it could provide a residence in that buying a house. Where's the differential between a shelter and a residence?
Okay, good question. What's the difference between shelter costs and actually buying a house or something like that? And I would say it's the nature of the beast. It's a monthly transaction versus a one-time transaction. And the Social Security Administration only cares about those monthly kinds of transactions. It's not going to cause a problem if we buy a house. I know there are other questions, but while you're thinking of your questions, I wanted to say something after Sarah spoke to kind of pull our presentations together. And I just want you to know, in a lot of the special needs trusts that I draw up, I will reference the ARC of Indiana Master Trust. And my concept is that the two trusts could work together. I think of it as like a savings account, checking account kind of thing. And to give you an idea of when we might use this, think about maybe your family member trustee who's feeling a little overwhelmed by all these public benefits rules like we talked about tonight, and reporting to the public benefits agencies about how they're spending the money, and maybe they're lying awake at night worried that they're going to do something to mess up the public benefits and not do a good job as trustee. Well, I'm happy to advise them. I've got a letter. I mentioned that brochure on the Special Needs Alliance website. There are various ways they can educate themselves, but they also might just take a little bit of the trust money and move it over to the ARC Trust. And then the two trusts can work together in tandem, with the big trust that's holding most of the money being like the savings account. And the primary job of the trustee then will be to make sure that the money's well invested and that it's growing for the trust beneficiary. And let the ARC Trust do all the heavy lifting with things that Sarah was talking about, like knowing the public benefits rules and making sure that the way the distributions are done won't interfere with the eligibility for the public benefits, and then also reporting to the public benefits agencies about how the money is used, which, how often do you guys do that now?
Oh gosh, whenever they ask, and We report, I think, on an annual basis, but also we get calls throughout the year from Social Security and Medicaid when they have questions about a specific beneficiary, and when those come in, we do answer those as soon as we possibly can.
Right, so to my point, if the ARC Trust is taking care of making sure the distributions are okay, and then they're doing the reporting that the trustee would otherwise have to do, it could be a really good combo. Unfortunately, though, we can't do this kind of tandem trust with the D4A anymore if the beneficiary of the trust is on SSI. Because there are lots of little picky things with SSI, and one of those picky things is with the D4A. Remember, you have to have the clause in the trust reimbursing the state or states for their Medicaid expenses when the beneficiary dies. And for some reason that I really can't explain because it's not logical to me, the Social Security Administration says, if you could take money out of the trust and move it over to a pooled trust like the ARC Trust, it's like you're terminating the trust now instead of at the time of the beneficiary's death, and it will accelerate your reimbursement to the state. So I just can't put the ARC in my D4A trusts anymore, which pains me to say it because that synergy between the trustee and the ARC Trust is something that I really value. I don't know if you want to make more comments about that, or do we have more questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You say about the you say about the TSI about I am totally well that. I take my money out for the bank or for the TSI also I totally well also for the TSI you know how do you trust somebody? How do you trust somebody? For me, for you, how we to the benefit for me, for my girlfriend Maggie. Also, I trust somebody. I trust Maggie. I trust you. What is it?
I think I hear you asking two questions. Let me see if I'm right. I think on the one hand, you're saying if your money's in trust, it's your money. How are you going to get access to it when you want to spend it on something?
I've been on for the ring. I get married or I get married. I'm totally well. I'm totally well. What is it?
Well, I think the second part I got was the relationship between the beneficiary and the trustee, and I think that's an extremely important relationship. I know I'm a professional trustee on top of everything else, and it's sometimes difficult to have a good relationship with the beneficiary when you have to say no. So we like to brainstorm. I think the answer to both of your questions is that a good trustee is going to try to figure out how you can access the money in a way that makes you happy. And something I haven't mentioned, I don't know if you guys are using the TrueLink Visa card, but there is a way that we can allow the beneficiary of the trust to have spending money in a way that we were never able to before, because the Social Security Administration has recognized what's called a administered credit card that could be administered by the trustee. And to put it into layman's terms, if I'm the trustee, I obtain a Visa card and I put it in the name of the beneficiary of the trust or in the name of the guardian of the beneficiary of the trust. So they're walking around with this credit card in their pocket that has their name on it, and they can go spend it anywhere they could spend a Visa card, but I control the card as trustee. So I put money on the card when I want to put money on, or if they're spending money on things that I don't like, I can take the money back off the card. I can also restrict where they can use the card. So if you tell me I want to buy a new television at Best Buy, I can put money on the card and I can activate it for use only at Best Buy. Or maybe you and I would make an arrangement that you're gonna have a $100 monthly allowance.
Right.
And I'm gonna put $100 on the card and you can use it on whatever you want.
But, I am, I am a parent. I am a parent. I'm a quick parent. Again, my nephew comes, Uncle P. I am quick parent. I get all that's about the TSI, what I to do.
I didn't catch that one. But we have a question right to your left there.
What if you move to another state?
Oh, good question. You want to take that one?
Yeah, so in the example for the ARC Trust, when you move out of state.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yes, so sorry. So the question was, what happens when you move out of state? In the ARC Trust, what we're going to try to do is find a pooled special needs trust that is comparable to what we do in the state that you are moving to. The biggest reason for that is that Medicaid laws vary by state. So we want to ensure that your trust is working with individuals who are the most knowledgeable as possible. And it's also beneficial for you to have a trustee that is close to where you live. If I'm the trustee for you and I live in Indianapolis, but you live in California, that might not be as effective as you having a trustee in California, who's not only knowledgeable, but also in the same time zone. If for any reason that, we work with you as you try to move and there isn't a comparable pooled special needs trust to where you are going, we will retain trustee responsibility. But with a trust, it is irrevocable, which means that once you put money in it, you can't withdraw it like cash. We need to spend it for your benefit. So if you move out of state, we aren't able to just write you a check to go to another special needs trust in that state or use it like cash. We can transfer it for you, but we can't withdraw it for you.
That's an excellent question, and I just want to point out this language that I like to put in trust that says you can utilize the ARC Master Trust if you want. I realize that people move from state to state a lot, so I've also got a little paragraph at the end of that that says if the beneficiary of the trust lives in a state other than Indiana, you can use a pooled trust in that state. And Sarah's too young and she hasn't been with the ARC long enough to remember that the ARC Trust is one of the very first pooled special needs trusts in the whole country. So when I started as a lawyer, there were only 3 or 4. And now we've gotten to the point where every state has at least one. So mobility is a lot easier than it used to be. There was a question here at the back, yeah.
I have 2 questions, or maybe 3. For Sarah, you mentioned the trust 2, okay? So on the trust 2, the beneficiary of that trust, did you say they can spend that money however they want and not affect any of the caveats, you might say?
Sure. So the question was, with Trust 2 at the ARC Master Trust, can we really use it however we want? And that might have been me just being a little glib. So a Trust 2 can be utilized to benefit and support an individual's quality of life within the parameters of the government benefits that they are receiving. So for example, if someone's receiving SSI, we're still not really able to pay for rent or a mortgage payment or those basic utilities because it could cause a reduction of that SSI benefit. So we're still following those same parameters, but outside of those, we're really able to continue to support an individual with that trust.
How about if it's their money that they put in?
Even
Still rules apply.
Yeah, so in those situations, if we're working with someone who has SSI and they've got that first party trust and they need assistance with, their rent or their mortgage payment, we can say, hey, it might not be in the best interest for us to use the trust because we don't want to see a reduction of that SSI check. Are there other bills or are there other things in your life that we can do to financially support you so you have more of your SSI check in those moments?
Third follow-up.
Yeah.
How about if the trust is Trust 2 funded with Social Security benefits off the parents?
So the question is, if a Trust 2 is funded for an individual who's receiving that, and what is the new term for it? It's the old
Childhood
DOC?
disability benefits.
The childhood disability benefits, is that what you're meaning?
Yes.
So it still follows the same thing. But in that aspect, though, we would consider that to be an SSDI versus SSI. So anyone who's pulling Social Security off their benefits, or off their parents' benefits, we're treating that as an SSDI payment versus an SSI payment.
And one question for Bob, I hope I don't have as many follow-up questions, but item 5 here, the 3 kinds of trust, I pretty well understand that, and that's trusts that are formed like Trust 2 with the individual's money. So all those trusts are trusts where the remainderment still goes first to the Medicare payments for that individual, Miller Trust, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, I'll try to repeat the question. So with all of the first-party varieties of the special needs trust, the question is, do we have to have the reimbursement to the state or states that provided the Medicaid assistance? And the answer is yes. So it doesn't matter whether it's a D4A trust or the ARC2, which is the D4C trust, or if it's a Miller trust, there's a reimbursement to the state at the time of the beneficiary's death.
Then you mentioned something that perked me up because I'm getting to the age where I'm going to have some medical problems. The money then that the parents put into the special needs trust, anything they put in is similar to what we just talked about, in that the remainderment of that still goes to the state?
Well, I'm not sure I followed your question, but I think I know what you're asking, which is if I, as the parent, need to go on Medicaid myself, and I put the money into trust for my child, is there going to be a reimbursement to the state? And the answer is no. So that's a situation where you get to have your cake and eat it too, which is a saying I never quite understood. But anyway, you get to have your cake and eat it too, because you can put the money in trust, go on Medicaid yourself, not prevent your child from staying on Medicaid, and there's no reimbursement to the state. So I haven't been able to do that very often or had to do it very often, but when I do, it's a win-win for everyone. We're not losing public benefits, and we're not giving the money to the state. And as proud a Hoosier as I am, I hate writing checks to the state.
Five-year look back, you don't do the 5-year look back for it.
Oh yeah, good question. That's a very good question. You probably don't even know how good a question that is. When you fund any of these trusts, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a third-party trust or a first-party trust or even the testamentary trust. There's no 5-year look back because there are no transfer penalties associated with any of these trust funding. So you can transfer the money to the trust and go on Medicaid the next day. Another question.
Will the special needs trust provide, or can it be used for something like assisted living costs?
You want to take that one?
Yep. So yes, what we would want to do though is bill the individual's insurances first to, oh gosh, I keep, so the question is, can a trust be used to pay for assisted living costs? The answer to that is yes. When we do that through the ARC Trust, we just want to ensure that the individual's insurances is being billed first. If there's any payment left over to the individual, the trust can support and pay for those costs. Right. And we do have a question from Facebook, which is, there's 2 questions here, which is, can you go to a bank and set up a special needs trust? And the second one is, can it be set up and funded but not have any fees if it's not being used? So do you want to go with the first one?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think the question is, can you just go to a bank and set up a trust? You got to go to a lawyer or to the ARC Trust to set up the trust, I think. I mean, you could probably do it online, but I don't know if I would recommend that. I think, especially when the beneficiary of the trust is going to be on SSI, I mentioned how particular they are with all of their rules. And it's not just rules about the way the money can be spent. It's also rules about the way the trust can be written. So I'd be concerned, especially if SSI is involved, about trying to wing it and go with your own trust. I would go to an attorney, I would go to the ARC Trust, one of those kind of combinations to get it set up. And then I think the second question was, if the trust is established, are there going to be fees if you're not actually using the money? And I think that's the wrong distinction. I think the question is, are there going to be fees based on whether there's money in the trust or not? And I think that's a good dividing line for you to understand here. If you go to the ARC Trust and you set up an account, but there's no money in there, or you come to Bob Feckman's office and you create a trust, but you don't put any money in there, then the next time you meet with the Social Security Administration and they say, do you have a trust? The answer is still no, because there's no money in there. And that's a problem that my clients have gotten themselves into more than once, where, of course, you want to be honest with the Public Benefits Agency. So they ask you if you have a trust, and you know you have one in the drawer. So you say, yes, I have a trust, but you really don't have one until there's money in there. So I want to point that out, and then also say, you're not going to have fees or taxes or anything if it's an empty trust. I describe an empty trust as being like an empty bucket. And until you pour money in there, you don't have to notify the public benefits agencies that you have the trust, and you also don't have to pay bank fees or taxes or anything like that. Now, I want you to answer the question, though, if I have an unfunded ARC trust, aren't there some little fees? They're small fees.
Yeah, there is a small fee. We call that a renewal fee. That just supports when we check in with you on an annual basis. There's no money in the account. Currently, it's $89 a year. But that gives us the time to check in with you annually. We give you the enrollment forms that you use to fill out with us, and so say, hey, has anything changed? This contact information you gave us for your loved one, for yourself, for the key people that you've named, is this still accurate? So that when we do end up utilizing the trust, we have the correct information. Because the thing that we don't want to have happen is, we have this trust set up and 10 years go by. And then we start utilizing the trust and none of the phone numbers are correct anymore. So we don't know how to get in touch with the beneficiary. We can't get in touch with key people. So that's what that renewal fee ensures, that we are up to date with not only your situation, but with what your loved one is going through, anything that they might need or have from a support standpoint that we want to be aware of, so that when it comes time for the trust to be used, we are as up to date on what their needs are going to be.
We're about out of time, aren't we? I'm happy to answer more questions,
Yeah,
but
me too.
I don't want to derail your whole.
Hugh, go ahead. What about a credit union? Can you set up a master? Can you set up a special needs trust through that? Or does it have to be a bank?
That's a good question, Hugh. I have seen all sorts of different accounts associated with trusts, and I'll point this out so you all understand. Remember, I described a trust as being like a bucket, and you can really put anything you want to in that bucket. When I'm a trustee and I get a check to fund the trust, I go to my favorite bank, but I could also go to my credit union and I could create an account in the name of that trust at the credit union, and I could put the money in there. Or if I buy a house, I can put that in the name of the trust, or I could have investments at Schwab or wherever I want to invest the money, and it's all in the name of the trust, so it's like it fits in that bucket.
One last question for the ARC. You said you had about $118 million at First Indiana. You keep the accounts spread up so the federally deposited insurance and stuff is covering all of that, or what do you do if some trust accounts have got a significant sum of money in them?
Sure, so that pool of money is together, so we are a pooled special needs trust and what that means is, for our accounts that are invested, we lump all of those accounts together, and so they are invested in one lump sum for a better return on investment for all of our beneficiaries. So with the Bank of Indianapolis, they are the ones who are managing from a federal tax perspective to ensure that we are in line so that we don't impact any of that for our beneficiaries. I hope that answers your question, and if not, come talk to me.
Well,
And
I'll make
the
a-
question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, you were asking specifically about federal deposit insurance, right? I don't think that's relevant to these investments at the bank, but with your ARC2 accounts, aren't they invested in things like EE bonds and bank accounts?
Yeah.
Maybe there is FDIC insurance with those.
Yeah, so we are invested in, a small portion of that is in a money market, but the larger majority of that is in mutual funds and mutual equity funds as well. So they are, I believe, FDIC insured.
Thank you for having us.
Hold on a minute, okay.
Thank you both. We're going to wrap this up and allow them to head back to their tables so they can answer some individual questions if you have any. So please feel free to stick around for a few more minutes. And if you have not already done so, when you came in, you received a survey. This one's a little bit longer than we've had in the past. We are working on developing our 2023 events and classes calendar. We want to know what other types of informational meetings and education would you like to receive. So please take the time, if you can, to let us know what other educational opportunities you would like. And we will do our best to locate speakers that have expertise on those subjects. One of the other questions is, what kind of goals are your self-advocates working on right now? And what are some of the classes and things that ILAD might be able to offer along the way to help educate your self-advocate to live more independently and achieve greater independence? So we hope that you'll take the time to just fill out that survey and bear with us on the length. I want to mention that this first table to my left here, we have the displays on a cooking class and a relationship class. Those are both coming up very soon. Actually, relationship class is going to start on August 16th. That's an 8-week session. And then in October, we're going to start the cooking class, and that's a 6-week session. So if you are interested in more information about either one of those for your self-advocates, please come visit us at the table over here, and we can provide some more details. As Tom mentioned earlier, we have another event later this month, August 18th. At that point, we are going to cover current financial planning, specifically investment accounts. Our own Deb Easterday is going to share information on the Indiana ABLE accounts and how those differ from the special needs trust that we learned about this evening. And then we also will have the opportunity in October, as I mentioned, to talk more about the benefits, the SSI, SSDI, and how to manage all of that while you're working and having an income. So that concludes our program for this evening. I want to thank the program committee. A special thanks to both Sarah and Bob for presenting with us tonight, and welcome to Matt Foltz as he begins his journey as our executive director here at ILAD. Any last minute comments? Okay. Thank you for coming. Please feel free to stop by and ask any questions you might have of them or of ILAD. Thanks so much.